Most people spend their entire lives believing in limits. They believe they're not strong enough, not talented enough, not capable enough to achieve something extraordinary. But what if the biggest limits in your life were never real? What if the voice telling you to stop, the voice telling you to quit, was simply the voice of fear? There's a man who refused to listen to that voice. A man who transformed pain into power, weakness into strength, and excuses into relentless discipline. Welcome to English Bookshelf. Today we explore Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, a story about mastering your mind and unlocking the hidden strength within you. Imagine waking up every morning feeling trapped inside your own life, feeling like your past defines you, feeling like the world has already decided who you are and how far you can go. Imagine growing up in a home filled with fear, violence, and constant struggle, where every day feels like survival and every night feels like another reminder that life is unfair. Now imagine that same person, the same boy who once felt powerless, eventually becoming one of the toughest endurance athletes in the world, running ultramarathons, completing brutal military training, and pushing his body and mind far beyond what most people believe is possible. This is the story behind Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And it is not just a story about physical strength, it is a story about the incredible power of the human mind and what happens when someone refuses to accept the limits that life has placed on them. David Goggins begins his journey in a place that many people would describe as hopeless. His childhood was filled with poverty, racism, and abuse, and the environment around him constantly reinforced the idea that he would never achieve anything meaningful in his life. School was not easy for him, confidence was almost non-existent, and the future looked dark and uncertain. Most people in that situation slowly accept the life they are given. They begin to believe the labels placed on them. They start to think that their past defines their future. But David Goggins refused to accept that story. Inside him, there was something different, something restless, something that refused to stay quiet. And that was the beginning of the mindset that would eventually change his life. One of the most powerful ideas introduced in this book is something David Goggins calls the 40% rule. He explains that when your mind tells you that you are exhausted, when your body feels like it cannot continue, when everything inside you is screaming for you to stop, you are usually only operating at about 40% of your true potential. Most people quit long before they reach their real limits. They stop when things become uncomfortable. They stop when the challenge becomes difficult. They stop when their mind tells them that they are done. But Goggins discovered something extraordinary. Your mind is not always telling you the truth. Your mind is designed to protect you from discomfort, pain, and uncertainty. But sometimes that protection becomes the very thing that holds you back from growth. The moment you push beyond that mental barrier, the moment you ignore the voice that says you can't, you begin to discover a level of strength you never knew existed. But reaching that point requires something that most people avoid. It requires facing the truth. David Goggins talks about a concept he calls the accountability mirror. This is not a physical mirror, although sometimes he literally used one. It represents the brutal honesty required to confront your weaknesses. Standing in front of the mirror and admitting the truth about your life is one of the hardest things anyone can do. Admitting that you are out of shape. Admitting that you are lazy. Admitting that you have been making excuses. Admitting that you are not living up to your potential. Most people spend their lives avoiding that moment of truth. They blame their circumstances. They blame other people. They blame their past. But the moment you take complete responsibility for your life, everything changes. Because once you accept responsibility, you also gain control. Goggins explains that the path to greatness is not comfortable. It is not easy. It is filled with pain, discipline, and sacrifice. But every challenge you face becomes a tool for building mental toughness. And that is where the real transformation begins. Instead of running away from pain, Goggins learned to use pain as a weapon. Every obstacle became an opportunity to become stronger. Every failure became a lesson. Every moment of discomfort became proof that he was moving beyond the limits that once controlled him. As your audience listens to this story, they begin to realize something powerful. The real battle in life is not against the world. It is against the voice inside your own head. The voice that says you are not good enough. The voice that says you should quit. The voice that tells you to stay comfortable. And David Goggins shows us that when you learn to control that voice, when you learn to push past the mental barriers that most people never question, you unlock a version of yourself that you never believed was possible. And this realization becomes the foundation of the entire message behind Can't Hurt Me. Because the true limits of your life are not defined by your past, your circumstances, or even your physical ability. They are defined by the boundaries you place on your own mind. And the moment you decide to break those boundaries, your life begins to change in ways you never imagined. As David Goggins begins to understand that his greatest enemy is not the world around him, but the limits inside his own mind, he reaches a moment in his life where everything feels unbearable. He is overweight, working a job that drains him, and living a life that feels far away from the person he wants to become. One day, while watching television, he sees a documentary about the brutal training required to become a Navy SEAL. The training is described as one of the most difficult military programs in the world, designed to break even the strongest individuals. Most people watching that program would feel fear. Most people would think it is impossible. But something inside Goggins reacts differently. Instead of seeing an impossible challenge, he sees an opportunity. An opportunity to destroy the weak version of himself and rebuild a stronger one. At that moment, he makes a decision that will completely change his life. He decides to become a Navy SEAL. But there is one huge problem. He is far from ready. At that time, Goggins weighs nearly 300 pounds, his physical condition is poor, and the path ahead seems impossible. Yet instead of giving up, he makes a commitment to change. He locks himself into a routine of extreme discipline. Day after day, he runs, trains, and pushes his body through pain that most people would never willingly face. Slowly, the weight begins to drop. Slowly, the mindset begins to change. Slowly, the person staring back at him in the mirror begins to look different. But the physical transformation is only the beginning, because the real battle is happening inside his mind. There are days when his body screams for him to stop. There are moments when doubt tries to return. There are nights when exhaustion feels overwhelming. But every time that voice inside his head tells him to quit, Goggins remembers something powerful. He remembers that the voice telling him to stop is not the truth. It is simply the voice of comfort trying to protect him from discomfort. And if he listens to that voice, he will return to the life he once hated. So instead of stopping, he pushes harder. Eventually, after months of relentless effort, he earns the opportunity to enter Navy SEAL training. But the journey is far from over. In fact, it is only just beginning. The training program he enters is known for its brutal intensity. It is designed to break people mentally before it breaks them physically. Days are filled with endless running, swimming in freezing water, carrying heavy equipment, and surviving with almost no sleep. The most famous part of this training is something called Hell Week. For 5.5 days, candidates are pushed to their absolute limits. They run through mud. They carry boats over their heads. They endure freezing temperatures. They survive on only a few hours of sleep. And many of them quit. Throughout the training area, there is a bell. Anyone who wants to quit only needs to walk up and ring the bell. The moment they ring it, the suffering ends. The moment they ring it, the challenge is over. But the moment they ring it, they also give up their dream. Many people ring the bell, but David Goggins refuses. Even when his body is exhausted, even when his legs feel like they cannot move, even when pain becomes unbearable, he continues. Because by this point, he has learned something that most people never understand. Your body can handle far more than your mind believes. Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever. Through this process, Goggins develops what he calls mental calluses. Just like physical calluses form when your hands repeatedly face friction and pressure, mental calluses form when your mind repeatedly faces challenges and discomfort. Every time you push through something difficult, your mind becomes stronger. Every time you refuse to quit, your confidence grows. Every time you survive pain, you prove to yourself that you are capable of more than you thought. And over time, this process builds an unstoppable mindset. A mindset that is not afraid of challenges. A mindset that does not run from pain. A mindset that embraces difficulty as the path to growth. As your audience listens to this part of the story, they begin to realize that David Goggins is not extraordinary because he was born with special talent. He is extraordinary because he made a decision to stop making excuses, a decision to face the truth, a decision to push past the limits that once controlled him. And that decision is something every single person listening to this story has the power to make. Because the lesson behind Can't Hurt Me is not just about becoming a Navy SEAL or running ultramarathons. It is about discovering the strength that already exists inside you. The strength that appears when you stop running from difficulty and start facing it directly. And the moment you choose that path, you begin to realize that the limits you once believed in were never real. They were simply barriers created by fear, comfort, and doubt. And once those barriers begin to break, the version of yourself waiting on the other side is stronger than anything you have ever imagined. As David Goggins completes the brutal journey of Navy SEAL training and proves to himself that he is capable of surviving one of the toughest programs in the world, something inside him changes forever. He realizes that the greatest victory was not simply earning the title of Navy SEAL. The greatest victory was discovering the incredible strength hidden inside the human mind. But instead of slowing down and enjoying his success, Goggins continues searching for new challenges that push him even further beyond the limits of comfort. Because once you realize that your mind has been holding you back, something strange happens. Comfort begins to feel dangerous. You begin to crave difficulty. You begin to search for challenges that force you to grow. And this is exactly what Goggins does. He begins competing in some of the most brutal endurance races in the world, races that stretch across hundreds of miles and push athletes to the edge of physical collapse. At one point, with almost no experience in long-distance running, Goggins enters an ultramarathon that covers 100 miles. Most experienced runners spend years preparing for such a race. Goggins had almost no preparation. His body was not ready. His feet began to break down. His muscles began to fail. His body started to shut down. But instead of quitting, he relied on something far stronger than physical preparation. He relied on his mind. And during these moments of extreme pain, Goggins developed one of the most powerful mental strategies he describes in the book. He calls it the cookie jar method. The cookie jar represents the collection of every difficult moment you have survived in your life. Every obstacle you overcame. Every hardship you endured. Every moment where you refused to quit. Each of those memories becomes like a cookie stored inside the jar. And whenever life becomes difficult again, whenever doubt begins to grow, you open that jar and remind yourself of everything you have already survived. You remind yourself that you have been through pain before. You remind yourself that you have overcome challenges before. You remind yourself that you are stronger than the voice in your head that is telling you to quit. This method becomes one of Goggins' most powerful mental tools. Because in moments of struggle, the mind often forgets how strong it really is. But the cookie jar reminds you of your own history of resilience. It reminds you that the person you are today has already survived countless battles. As Goggins continues pushing his limits, he also introduces another powerful idea called taking souls. This concept is not about harming others. It is about dominating the challenges that life places in front of you. When people doubt you, when they underestimate you, when they believe you cannot succeed, the best response is not anger. The best response is relentless effort. You prove them wrong through discipline. You prove them wrong through performance. You prove them wrong through results. And by doing that, you take their doubt and turn it into fuel. The deeper message behind all these stories becomes clear. Most people spend their lives avoiding pain. They run from discomfort. They stay inside safe routines. They search for the easiest path. But the easiest path rarely leads to growth. Growth lives on the other side of difficulty. Growth lives inside the moments that force you to confront your weaknesses. Growth lives in the hours when you keep going even though everything inside you is telling you to stop. David Goggins' life becomes proof of this truth. He transforms himself from someone who felt powerless into someone capable of pushing the limits of human endurance. Not because he had extraordinary talent, not because he was lucky, but because he made a decision to master his mind, a decision to face the truth about his weaknesses, a decision to use pain as a tool for growth. And as your audience listens to this part of the story, something powerful begins to happen. They begin to question their own limits. They begin to wonder how many times they stopped too early. They begin to realize that the voice telling them to quit may not actually represent their true limit. Because the human mind is incredibly powerful, but only when it is trained, only when it is challenged, only when it learns that discomfort is not something to fear, but something to embrace. And this realization prepares us for the final and most important message of Can't Hurt Me. Because the ultimate goal of this book is not just to inspire you. It is to challenge you to take control of your life, to challenge you to stop making excuses, to challenge you to push beyond the limits that have been quietly controlling your decisions. And when you accept that challenge, your life begins to transform in ways you never imagined. As the journey of David Goggins continues through relentless challenges, painful failures, and extraordinary achievements, the deeper message of Can't Hurt Me becomes clearer with every story he shares. This book is not simply about running ultramarathons or surviving Navy SEAL training. It is about something far more important. It is about discovering the incredible strength that already exists inside the human mind. Because most people go through life believing that their limits are real. They believe they cannot push further. They believe they're not strong enough. They believe their past has already decided their future. But David Goggins proves something different. He proves that most of the limits we believe in are created by fear, comfort, and the voice inside our head that tries to protect us from discomfort. And the moment you learn to challenge that voice, your life begins to change. One of the most powerful ideas Goggins leaves us with is the understanding that life will always include pain. There will always be obstacles. There will always be moments where things feel unfair. But pain is not something that should destroy you. Pain is something that can build you. Every difficult moment carries a lesson. Every challenge carries an opportunity. Every struggle carries the chance to become stronger than you were before. The difference between people who grow and people who remain stuck is not talent. It is mindset. It is the willingness to face the truth about yourself. It is the courage to accept responsibility for your life. And it is the discipline to keep moving forward even when the path becomes difficult. Throughout the book, Goggins repeatedly reminds us that greatness does not come from comfort. Greatness comes from pushing yourself beyond the point where most people stop. It comes from waking up when you do not feel motivated. It comes from working when you feel tired. It comes from continuing when quitting would be easier. Because every time you refuse to quit, you strengthen your mind. Every time you overcome a challenge, you build confidence in your ability to face the next one. And over time, those small victories accumulate. They create a version of you that is stronger, more disciplined, and far more capable than the person you once believed yourself to be. As your audience listens to this final part, they begin to understand something powerful. The story of David Goggins is not meant to show that he is extraordinary. It is meant to show that extraordinary strength exists inside ordinary people. It exists inside anyone willing to face discomfort. Anyone willing to push beyond fear. Anyone willing to stop making excuses and start taking responsibility. Because the truth is that your life will never change by accident. It changes when you make a decision. A decision to stop accepting the limits that have been placed on you. A decision to confront your weaknesses instead of hiding from them. A decision to build the mental toughness required to overcome whatever obstacles life places in your path. And when you make that decision, something incredible begins to happen. The challenges that once seemed impossible begin to feel manageable. The fears that once controlled you begin to lose their power. And the version of yourself that once felt trapped slowly transforms into someone capable of achieving far more than you ever imagined. This is the real message behind "Can't Hurt Me." Not that life is easy, not that success comes quickly, but that the human mind is far stronger than it believes. And once you learn to master that mind, once you learn to push past the mental barriers that have been holding you back, you unlock a level of potential that can completely change your life. Because in the end, the only limits that truly exist are the ones you refuse to challenge. And the moment you decide to challenge them, the moment you refuse to quit, the moment you take control of your own mindset, you begin to discover the truth that David Goggins wants every reader to understand. That no matter where you started, no matter how difficult your past has been, no matter how impossible your goals may seem, you are capable of far more than you think. And when you realize that truth, the path in front of you becomes limitless. In the end, the greatest battle you will ever fight is not against the world. It is against the voice inside your own mind. The voice that tells you to stay comfortable, to stay safe, to stay where you are. But the moment you choose discipline over comfort, courage over fear, and effort over excuses, everything begins to change. If this story inspired you, subscribe to English Bookshelf for more powerful book insights. Because once you master your mind, nothing in this world can hurt you.